Hi, everyone, and welcome to week 15. Here are your instructions for assignment 4. So, your objective for assignment 4 is to analyze the work you have done. Here we go. Analyze the work you've produced this semester and reflect on your reading, writing, and thinking processes so that you may transfer the processes and technique that were the most effective for you into your future reading and writing. Assignment 4 is a two-part exam with a written component and an oral component conducted one-on-one with the instructor. The written and oral portions of the exam are equally weighted in the assignment 4 overall score. Your overall assignment 4 score counts 15% of your course grade. Both portions of assignment 4 are scheduled to be completed by the end of the last week of classes, the written part done by the end of week 15, and the oral part completed by reading and review day, which is Friday, December 12th. How to prepare for your written portion of assignment 4. In the written portion of assignment 4 is going to ask you to make claims about improvements this semester in your rhetorical thinking, ability to write in new genres, studenting habits, and most importantly, provide evidence for those claims. Evidence can be anything that can be considered an artifact or record of this course, including brainstorming notes, reading annotation, free writes, in-class activities, drafts, revisions, and final papers, etc. This means you should spend your preparation time looking back over all the materials you've produced in the course and selecting those that provide evidence of growth and change in your rhetorical thinking and new genre writing habits and processes. You should have this evidence organized and readily available to you by the time you take the written portion of the exam. So my advice is to put all the materials that you have from this course or what you've done over the semester and place it in a folder so that way when you get ready to do your written portion, it is all there before you sit down to do it. Studenting habits refers to habits that might not be directly about your reading or writing. They might be ways you discover to get yourself to focus better, structure your study time, manage your time generally, avoid procrastination, be more engaged in class, etc. These habits help you get the reading and writing of the course done and done well. Your answers to the written portion of the exam will be graded based on clarity, specificity, and support for your claims, and your explanations for how your evidence supports your claims. Grammar and mechanics will only affect your grade if they affect the clarity of your response. For example, if I cannot read or understand a sentence or tell where it begins or ends, your clarity grade will be affected. So, how to prepare for the oral. Once you have completed the oral portion of assignment 4, first be sure to sign up for a conference time and complete your oral exam reservation ticket on Blackboard. Note your conference time, which will be through Zoom, and read the reservation ticket statements thoroughly so you understand the penalties for lateness and not showing up to your oral exam. The oral exam will have 3 questions. 2 will focus on rhetorical thinking and writing and new genre skills. For these questions, I will give you a future reading writing scenario and ask you to describe what strategies or processes from the course you would use in those scenarios and why you think those will work. The third question will be a follow up question to something you wrote in the written portion of assignment 4. This means you should spend your oral exam preparation time thinking back over specific rhetorical and genre strategies you used in this course and determine which ones you think are transferable to different reading and writing situations in the future. Looking over the evidence you collect for the written portion of assignment 4 should help you with this. You should also review your answers from the written portion of assignment 4 before your oral exam. Make a copy of your written exam answers, as will be suggested in the instructions to the written exams. So, your oral grading exam grading criteria. Your answers to the oral exam will be based on the level of detailed clarity, explanation, and logical reasons or examples that you provide. We are not grading you on how polished a speaker you are. Rather, we are focusing only on the content of your answers. If something you say is unclear, I will ask you follow-up questions. So, when we say claims and evidence, One way to think about claims and evidence, you've already done this semester. Every time you start a paragraph of making a point to either prove your position, like in assignment 3, or analyzing one of De Cruz or Keltner's or Shin and Mongrain's points, you actually start with a claim. So that topic sentence of your paragraph is usually a claim, and then the rest of it is the evidence. So when we talk about claims, this is the way of announcing your focus. So when you're doing this, you do not want to say things like, I became a better writer this semester. What you want to do is be as specific as possible. For example, I learned more about using quotation sandwiches, correction, quotation sandwiches. These are your mini arguments that support the paper's main arguments. So the evidence, if you say, I learned more about creating quotation sandwiches, then the remaining part is the evidence, which is going to be support. This can come in a way of, maybe you showed a quotation sandwich from your paper number 1, and then paper number 3 on how you introduce quote and then explain the quote. Maybe it could be a case of your claim can be, I uh, learned how to use my experience or give an illustration so that way my reader can understand what I'm writing. Then you will show where you gave an illustration. You talked maybe about the stars in the sky in the from De Cruz, versus when you got ready to make your point in your third one, another example of using your illustration. So now what I'm going to show you is an example, a student example of a paragraph with claim and evidence that you can think about. So here's an example of a student writing, of analyzing their own writing of claims and evidence. So let's take a look at it. So the paragraph states, one thing I learned this semester is the importance of thinking about my reader and what they do and or don't know. Being told to write each major essay for an audience who had not read the essays we were reading helped me realize why I needed to explain and provide context for quotes. If someone hasn't read Chomsky at all, or Marathi, or A and A, many of their quotes feel taken out of context and don't make sense. By assignment 3, I had learned how to do this. In assignment 1, both in peer review and conference, I was told I was missing the bottom of my quotation sandwiches, and I was. Here is how I handle a typical quote in assignment 1. According to Chomsky et al., ChatGPT and similar programs are incapable of distinguishing the possible from the impossible, unquote. There's no context or an explanation for this quote. Compare this to how I handle a typical quote from A&A in assignment 3. In his essay, A&A describes the kinds of conversation he can have with LaMDA, an earlier version of a generative large language model. He describes some of LaMDA's responses to the question, what is your favorite island? And writes that LaMDA's response are BSing because a computer program can't have a favorite island, but that BS is precisely what we have requested. What he means by this is that LaMDA's answers to the question and the follow-up question makes sense even if they aren't true, and that is all we expect from an LLM. In the second example, I know I have to give the imaginary reader who has not read ANA an explanation of what LaMDA is and how ANA experimented with it for the quote from ANA to make any sense. I also knew I had to explain what ANA meant by BS because readers might have a different definition of that term. So here, not only does the reader, the first thing I want you to pay attention to is that the writer makes a claim. One thing I learned this semester is the importance of thinking about my reader, so the purpose of their writing, and what they do and don't know. Being told to write each major essay for an audience who had not read the essays we were reading helped me realize why I needed to explain and provide context for the quotes. Once the writer made these two statements, the rest of it is evidence. So their claim is not only that they need to think about their reader, but why it's important to think about their reader. So then the next sentence says someone hasn't who hasn't read Chomsky et al., Mirati, or ANA, many of their quotes feel taken out of context and don't make sense. By assignment 3, I had learned how to do this. So then they go ahead and give you an example. They showed what they did in assignment 1. So they had the quote, but there was no explanation for it. But then they showed how, in comparison, they did it for the third assignment. And then in the third assignment, they introduce the quote, they give what the quote is, and then they say what he means by this, in the same sense of, you could say what De Cruz is saying, what Keltner is saying, what Shin and Mongrain is saying. Also, you could add on to how you illustrate this. So maybe it was a case of you're saying something that De Cruz and Keltner are saying, but now you illustrate it. Like, for example, I went on a wonder walk. Then the very last part of the evidence is in the second example. Know I have to give the imaginary reader who has not read ANA an explanation of what these terms mean and how ANA experimented with it from the quote for the quote from ANA to make any sense. So in this sense, this writer is letting their reader know that now they know where they made mistakes in their writing and how they corrected the mistakes. Not just so much that they became a better writer. For this one, in this sample paragraph, they showed us how they understand and acknowledge the importance of a quotation sandwich. So this example will be available for you to take a look at. It doesn't exactly have to be like this, but this is a very good example of making a claim that's not vague, that's not too broad, but being very specific. It could be something, if you're talking about your reading, maybe it was, I learned how to annotate in the corners by the paragraph or summarize the paragraph, and you can give an example of that. It could also be a case of, I learned excuse me, the importance of my illustration. And you can show from maybe paper one where you didn't have much illustration, but then by paper 3 you do. Or it could be a case of how to balance they say, I say, and show you don't have to give your whole paper, but a case of, I had a lot of they say, or I had a lot of my own personal examples and enough and not enough they say. So either one of those. But what we're looking for is a claim that's kind of specific to that writing. One thing you can do is to go back to, so one thing that you can do is go back to the very first week and the very first underneath assignment 1, entering the conversation, and take a look at your learning journal for your personal goals. Remember the goals that you wrote down? One way you could start by putting your ideas together is taking a look at those goals and writing to yourself or making a note to yourself, did you meet those goals? If you did meet those goals, how did you meet those goals? If you did not meet those goals, why do you believe that you didn't meet those goals? That will help you with being specific about reading, writing, and thinking that is involved in English 110. So once you have that, then go back and look at your writings from your 3 papers and see where you have examples of where you have included these goals in your writing. So that will help you also prepare for this assignment. The other thing to think about as we're working on this is the oral part. So let's take a look at the oral exam.